All right. Welcome, everyone, to our third presentation here in the second room for our IACBE conference. We are excited today to have two presenters from Ashford University, and I'd like to introduce them very quickly as they will speak on creating dynamic assignment rubrics. Very interesting topic. And so we have Mr. Anthony DiTomaso, thank you very much for the correction, and Ms. Kathryn Latham, oh, please excuse me, Kathryn Latham, who will talk about the very, very interesting subject. So I will get out of the way and let them have the floor. Thank you very much.
Karen. Good morning, everybody. As Karen just introduced us, but I'm going to introduce us again because it's part of our spiel. My name is Kathryn Latham, and this is Anthony DiTomaso, and we both work at Ashford University within the Forbes School of Business and Technology. We are both assessment specialists within the school. I see a few familiar faces in the audience, and I know there's some people zooming in as well. But for those people who don't know what we actually do, I'll give you a little brief explanation of what we do in assessment. During the course revision process, we work with instructional designers and faculty, and we work on actually taking the assignment instructions and turning those instructions into rubrics. We make sure that the rubric criteria are clear, concise, and measurable, and those are three things that we are going to repeat throughout this presentation. The faculty look over what we come up with in the rubric instructions and the rubric directive, and usually they either approve it or they ask us to reword it. But if they know what's good for them, they usually approve it. So.
Okay, so when a faculty member creates an assignment instructions, they have a whole lot of information. And that's good because it lets the student know exactly what it is that they need to do. But sometimes it can be a little bit confusing for the student to know exactly what things to put in their assignment. And so what the rubric does, what Kathryn and I do, is we take those assignment instructions and we break them down. We make sure that the rubric is going to be very detailed, but also very concise. We also make sure that the rubric is going to have performance levels to it, and also make sure that we use high order verbs. So a lot of us here in education are very familiar with Bloom's verbs. Very boring stuff sometimes. I was reminded of this very recently. My girlfriend is an architect, and we were at an event of hers a few weeks ago. There were a lot of architects and designers and construction people there, and I'm trying to explain what I do, and I say I work in higher education. I deal with Bloom's verbs. I get a lot of blank stares back. But what we deal with here is when we have the lower order Bloom's verbs. These are things like remembering and understanding. Mid-level Bloom's verbs, applying and analyzing, and the higher order verbs of evaluation and creation. So when we're creating the rubrics, what we want to make sure is when the subject is first being introduced to a student and they just have to show some basic understanding, we're going to use the lower order Bloom's verbs. We're going to make sure that they can remember or understand. When we get to a more advanced type of assignment, the student then is going to need to show that they can have a higher understanding of the material. And that's where we're going to have them apply or analyze the information. And once the student has to show mastery of the topic material, that's where we're going to ask them to do evaluation or even creating something of their own. There are many different stakeholders that are looking for a good rubric. These are going to include students. There's also going to be faculty that are going to benefit from a good rubric. And also, good rubrics are going to be beneficial for when we have to deal with things like assessment. And it gets very scary sometimes when we got to deal with the assessment people, but the better the rubric, the easier that's going to go.
Okay, so why do we care about making assessment easier? Other than making Anthony and our lives a lot easier, then I won't go into that. But it's just to ensure learning outcomes are actually being met. It's to validate that our students are learning what we say they're actually learning, which is again very important when you're working with rubrics and assignments and students and faculty. It's the confirmation like that accreditors like WASC, who Anthony just mentioned, look for. So how do we do this? How do we actually show that our students are learning? One of the ways is we, in assessment, we spend a lot of time mapping outcomes. I know it sounds really exciting, and sometimes it is. But so what we have to do is we have to map the course learning outcomes. We ensure that, sorry, I didn't even do this, just a second. Each individual criteria for an assignment should be mapped to the course learning outcome. And each course learning outcome should be mapped to the learning outcome of the program that the course is a part of. So the course learning outcome in Ashford, we say the CLO. I don't know if it's something everybody's learned. The program learning outcome is the PLO, and we also map to the ILO, the institutional learning outcome, which is what we do at Ashford. So programs will have additional accreditors that are specific to their industry, such as IACBE or ABET or COSMA. Those are a few of the examples which Anthony and I work with. This example, this is an example of an assignment criteria. So it explains the market analysis, which is, again, kind of clear and concise of what we're asking the student to do and also what the grader would grade. And we just kind of highlighted what the mapping is here. So we have our CLO, where our course learning outcome, the mapping. We have PLO, the program learning outcome, the mapping, and the ILO, the institutional learning outcome, and the mapping there. And then we've just put an example of if you needed to map it to an individual accreditor, such as IACBE.
So why is having a good rubric important to students? An easy way to ask that is to ask faculty members if you've ever had a student ask you questions about what's expected from them on an assignment, which happens all the time. The better the rubric, the less amount of questions you're going to have to deal like that. We actually surveyed about 100 current college students, and 98% of them said that they do prefer to have a detailed assignment rubric. In fact, they felt that that's going to help them to do a better job on the assignment, and they even expect there to be a good rubric. Of that group, 85% said that they expect there to be a good rubric. And so they can use that rubric basically like a checklist. They can go through and make sure that they're hitting everything that the faculty member is looking for.
Okay, the other aspects of importance is to the faculty. As we all know, such as everybody, faculty are busy people. They're busy grading and instructing and going through program reviews. So having a well-written rubric really cuts down on time. And it's something that we try and do to make the rubric clear and concise, and it just becomes, so the grading process becomes easier. Dynamic rubrics equals less time grading, which means less time in grading jail, which I'm sure nobody wants to be there. Additionally, applying a well-written rubric ensures consistency in grading. Sometimes you get different instructors who may have different interpretations of what it is they're actually grading. So that we're trying to get consistency in grading by applying the rubric.
So here's our first example of a rubric that needs a little bit of improvement. We've got the assignment criteria listed here, so overview, marketing methods, and recommendation. And just to put those of you that Kathryn and I work with at EASE, we didn't use any bad examples from Forbes, because there are no bad examples. So for overview, this is fairly straightforward. We're expecting the student to do an overview of the material, of the topic. But could this be a little bit better if we added just a few more words, some details about exactly what it is that we're looking from the student? Marketing methods, this one there's a bit of a problem with. What about marketing methods? Do we want them to explain them? Should they be analyzing them? Maybe they should be creating their own. More details are going to provide a better opportunity for the student to be successful. Recommendation is just like overview. It could be okay like this, but we could make it better with some more specificity.
Okay, so I'm going to come in as misimprove it. So I'm going to try and improve this assignment criteria. So the previous example, it was, didn't have any information. There was like lack of words. So words are good, too many not so. So we've got a clear Bloom's verb there, provides an overview of the marketing methods to include product placement and product development. So it's clear, it's concise, and it's measurable. And it's definitely an improvement on the previous one.
Okay, our second example of a rubric that needs improvement has to do with using multiple verbs. Ideally, we want to stick with just one verb for each assignment criteria. Occasionally, it's okay to use two verbs, but in general, you usually want to stick to just one verb. In our example here, we've actually got three verbs. So we have explains, justifies, and assesses. Now, there's two reasons why this becomes a problem. First is for mapping to our learning outcomes, because maybe explains maps to one learning outcome, but justifies maps to a different learning outcome. So that can be a bit confusing there. Also with grading for the faculty. Let's say the student does a really good job explaining, but they don't do a very good job justifying. How are the points supposed to be divvied up here? Is explaining more important than justifying? So that's another place where it can be a bit of a problem.
Okay, so let's improve this. Let's break it down. I like to say let's break it down. So with that sentence there, we have the three different verbs. Let's break it down to three different assignment criteria, which would be, again, clear, concise, measurable, easier for the student to read and look and see what it is they're actually having to do. Explains the history and theory of differentiation, justifies how the theory contrasts from traditional forms of instruction, and also assesses how the theories aid in the modern day classroom. And again, this is helpful for things like grading and mapping because it just simplifies the whole process.
Okay, our last example of a rubric that needs improvement is this one. And we want to remember, is it clear, is it concise, is it measurable? So if we look at the criteria here, reflective thought about personal perspectives and connections between this learning experience, past learning, self-insights, reflections of the final project, describe the following. If you've got to read it 3 or 4 times to figure out what it's asking, that's not clear. Concise, it's not concise, way too many words to be concise. And now with measurability, there's 2 things that we want to look for. Is it measurable to the learning outcomes like we talked about before? And here we don't see any learning outcomes that it's measured to. But also we want to think about the performance levels and how it measures there. We've got 3 performance levels listed, proficient at 25 points, basic at 15 points, and unsatisfactory at 0 points. Are these the only options that we have? If I'm grading this, it's going to be a little bit tough. Can I give 10 points? Can I give 17 points? If I give 14 points, is that going to be considered unsatisfactory? So it's a little confusing in that regard.
Okay, so that previous assignment criteria, which was that long thing that, very unclear. So it was actually asking for 6 different steps of the assignment criteria. And as you can see, again, we broke it down into 6 ones, took that big, long one, put it into 6. And I won't go through all of them, but I think nobody can argue that it looks a lot clearer. There's definitely an action there for each assignment criteria. And again, it just helps the student understand what they're supposed to do and what someone who's grading this assignment would look for as well. And then instead of going through all 6 of those, I'm sure everybody gets the picture after doing one. So I'm going to just give an example of what an improved rubric would look like. So we have the clear assignment instructions at the top. We have the Bloom's verb, describe the decisions made throughout the instructional design model. We have the different performance levels. So we've got distinguished, proficient, basic, below average, and non-performance. And again, they all have words there, which is explaining what to do to get the points. And the point weight at the bottom, instead of just having 5 for distinguished and 2 for basic, we're having a spread so that you can see what it is you need to do to get those points. And then last but definitely not least, we've got our mapping. So we've got our course learning outcomes mapping, the program learning outcome mapping, and the institutional learning outcome mapping as well. So that would be a good example of an improved rubric at least.
Okay, so what we've passed out to the people here is a template like this. And those of you that are Zooming in, if you would like this, you can just email and we can get it out to you, no problem. So this is a template that you can use when creating your own rubrics. We've got an area over here for the assignment criteria. You just want to remember 1 Bloom's verb. You've got an area to do your mapping to your learning outcomes, the 5 different performance levels, and then an area to put in the point weight ranges.
Okay, if you flip over your handout, we have a checklist of if you're going to be writing your own rubrics. It might help you. So when you're writing them, just ask yourself, Is the assignment criteria clear? Is it clear? Can you see what it is you're actually asking a student to do? Is the assignment criteria concise? Is it detailed but not overly cluttered? There's no words in there that don't really need to be in there. They don't add anything. Just take those out. Is there only one verb in the assignment criteria? Again, very important for things like to be able to measure it. And is the rubric measurable? Is it measurable on two aspects, the learning outcomes and also the performance levels? Again, two important parts for the rubric. Thank
That's
you.
a presentation. Any questions?
Any questions?
So are you assuming that every assignment in the course is measured for the program learning outcomes and the institution learning outcomes? So would you do this rubric for every single assignment? Is that how you do it here, Dasha?
No,
Every assignment? Or just key assignments that are measured for?
So we, at Ashford, I mean, we'll talk about Ashford. We only add the CLOs and the PLOs and the ILOs for certain assignments. So we don't deal with discussions, do we?
Correct.
We just deal with assignments. So it could be in the form of a paper or a presentation. But again, it's a little bit up to faculty as well. So if they would, sometimes they don't need a rubric. Sometimes it's graded on an external grading system, so it's not so much a rubric that a student looks at. But yeah, it's kind of like, it really depends. But we try and match the CLO, the PLO, and the ILO.
But even with our discussions as well, we still have those mapped to learning outcomes. It's just not, I would say the big difference is we don't track it the same way.
Yeah.
And that's where the rubric comes in handy, is to be able to really track it.
Yeah.
Yeah, what we do at Concordia is just utilize this rubric at signature assignment within the capstone.
Yeah.
And then everything else, and then even then, that's only for assessment purposes. The instructor can then create a grading rubric that can be separate from that.
Right.
So we as an institution will say, yes, you can do, encourage, use this one, don't be dumb.
Yeah.
But then if you want to do something different for your grading, go ahead and do so.
That sounds kind of like an Ashford, doesn't it? It just kind of
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So during the workshop yesterday, we focused on competencies, business competencies, and the importance of students to actually, number one, know what competencies they're gaining as they're going through the various courses, the total degree program as well, and so that they can speak it when they're going for the jobs and employers know they gained it. I'm just looking at what we track with our mapping to CLOs, PLOs, ILOs. Where do the competencies come in?
Right.
Yeah, good question. And I think that in general, it should, somehow the competency should have something to do with that particular course or program learning outcome. It may not be directly in there, but there should be kind of some, at least, reference to that area. That would also probably be where the mapping it to the individual program learning outcome, or I'm sorry, not the program, but the individual accreditor outcomes. So if that certification is like, let's say it's with IACBE, then that's why you would want to include that in your mapping as well. Does that make sense?
Yes. And then I was curious of others with other universities, how are you handling any types of assessment or anything regarding competencies and the actual business competencies that students are gaining going through your courses?
Well, that's determined based on our different assessment modes. At Concordia, our School of Business, we use 3 different types of assessment. One is the signature assignment, which is a major project that incorporates all the top areas within the School of Business. The second is standardized test using Peregrine testing. And then the third is we have focus group discussions in which we have trained individuals come in and analyze from the student's perspective how well they feel they've been taught the various disciplines.
That's what you do with the student, directly reviewed by the focus group leaders, and then it distill it down to samples.
Is that where the competencies really come out? Because you're interviewing the students directly and what they gained?
from their perspective. You know, so it's their perspective. And then the paragraph is based on, you know, this standardized approach. So we don't put, the reason we use 3 is because no one is perfect. So we try to find the mix, and if we see a consistency in certain areas where there's strength, it's good, you know, or if we see a consistency of an area that is weak, as we have, for example, in accounting, then we address that and say, okay, what do we need then to improve the competency of accountancy among our students?
So IACBE used to have 4, used to have 4 to direct to the measures, to reduce that. We had a 4th one, which was we would survey alumni. It seemed great, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years out. So what we taught you in the real world, how does it read our program or not? 6% response. That's why we tried that. But we tried email, we tried mail, we tried phone calls. Basically, students, our alums are not responsive because usually the first time that you're contacted by a university is, hey, you want to donate something?
Right.
So unfortunately, I thought that was one of the better measures of how are you doing out there, but what we've equipped you with. Couldn't get enough statistically enough responses.
Prior to this, we were just briefed on portfolio, where we could gather assessment information from the student level, and now with their new package, they can aggregate this from student to course to school, the department, school, and then the university, which is great. I was wondering, since they're now working with Ashford on this, are you guys integrating this into their platform down at the student level?
I think
Such
that would be a good
you know,
idea.
and
Yeah.
the reason for that is WASC requires evidence. Okay, so this is the evidence, you know, where, you know, 3 instructors have assessed the sampling of students' works. And then down here, the instructor puts down the appropriate level. This could all be done on their platform, and then it does all the aggregation, which would be incredible.
Yeah. That sounds good.
If we ask for that, you know, we're just a little Concordia.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
it's you guys ask for this. This could be, you know, powerful stuff.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. I mean, we're aware that we're working with portfolio, but we don't know any details about that. But yeah.
I would definitely suggest that that is a good idea.
Yeah, sure.
And this way we have a different system that does that. Like portfolio in a way is sort of student driven, but every rubric for any assignment that has been put through assessment ends up in a system that does that.
I thought before that, I thought portfolio was something that student driven, student used to get potential employers to look at their work, but this is a whole different application.
This is something new that he just briefed us on.
But it actually sounds like the waypoint or foods outside. But we have a system that does that because every single rubric, all of learning outcomes
Okay,
are tracked
probably have your own.
with a
Waypoint.
yeah, waypoint is just a massive amount of data.
That's the
on
difficulty
every
we have. Our university has done an incredible job at this. But aggregating it, it's,
Yeah.
we are doing a very, it's different, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Do you have an internal tool you use?
Yeah. Yeah, it's been under development for a decade. And then that's why we use it. Instructors are forced.
You
to
have more money than we do to do this.
It was a long time ago that it was built actually to be sold
Oh,
to other universities. Kind of like development of it has maybe stalled a little bit, but that's what it is intended to do, is to take all of those rubrics and aggregate the information.
And is it still the idea to take it to market?
That would be a question for the parent company.
Yeah.
so how do you deal in that tool with one
Good to ask.
committee and maybe one? So the point earlier that you, one assignment may go to multiple learning outcomes. How do you deal with that tool?
I just know as an instructor, I just fill rubrics out.
So-
That's all, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
But
So-
you can actually see that on our assessment website. Because our assessment website identifies, for various objectives, what assignments are being considered that are factored in and evaluated to see how we're performing against those. So that is public. You can actually go to our website. and see
No,
that.
what-
Just think about it as our curriculum maps.
Yeah.
Where we identify which classes, which assignments are going to be used in determining our assessment level of CLOs, ULOs, PLOs, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had a question about the performance levels. Is it always 5? And
That's what we use, and we found that works really well just because there tends to be, 5 areas where from that, perfect to, non-performance, and then just a little bit in between there. So for us, it seems to work really well. I know we've used it for a long, long time.
But we know other places use less.
Exactly.
So-
We use 4 to force not having choosing the middle path. Easy, it's based on, really not that. So we force ourselves to rate ourselves that the 2 high levels are good, the 2 bad levels are bad. You can just always be
Yeah.
in the middle of the high, we're good.
Yeah.
My opinion is, 4 to 5 is good. 3 just isn't enough. More than 5 is a bit excessive, I think.
Finding errors.
Exactly, yeah.
It's hard enough
Yeah.
writing one with 4,
Yes.
Doing
Ask us
5,
about
6 and more,
Yeah.
it's just like, yeah.
that. Yeah.